Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to another conversation and episode here at the Marks of a Man podcast, production of Men Build Men. We are here in the studio in Cartersville, Georgia, with our guest and friend, Eddie Mitchell. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, man. Thank you for inviting me.
You bet. So we definitely wanted to highlight Eddie's life, and I'll try to steer the conversation a little bit about your biography and a little bit more about it. We were speaking prior to the recording a little bit about some manly things, and I maybe go back and rewind to talk about that. But I did want to tell the viewers and the listeners that Eddie's a guy that I respect his understanding of the Bible and his delivery in preaching and teaching the Bible. And we're definitely going to have him on some subsequent conversations and let you turn it loose in terms of like how God would allow you to teach and explain some things from the Bible to some of our listeners' audience. So we definitely look forward to that, man. But for today's episode, I want to sort of step back, so maybe begin to cover a little bit about who is Eddie Mitchell, take the listeners back into your life. So, man, were you born here in Cartersville?
No, I was born in Acworth, Georgia, 1966, to Nellie Mitchell and Martin. Grew up there in Acworth, went to Cass High School.
Okay.
Graduated in 1986. And
do you have any brothers and sisters growing up?
Yes, sir.
Are you the oldest, youngest? What, like, where are you at?
I'm like the middle child. I got an older sister, older brother, and my younger sister. She's the baby, and
Okay.
she's the spoiled one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was four of us, and we grew up in a household. We wasn't rich. We couldn't take vacations like other families did. But as I was telling you in there earlier, how Daddy still provided, Mama still provided, and they made a way for us. So.
Yeah, we were talking. So, Marks of a Man podcast. We definitely want to try to continue to highlight and observe characteristics of manly behavior, correct behavior. If it's possible, we want to convert that over to like, well, this is how Jesus behaved, so therefore we should behave. Yeah. I think the Bible is clear that we are to be providers. Your dad, you were telling me a little bit about your father. Like, talk a little bit about your father in terms of what his profession was, and then why he brought you along as a young boy. You were telling me earlier before we started recording.
Yes, as I said, my dad worked almost 40 years with one paving company out of Marietta, Georgia, and I watched him basically go to work day in, day out, and he instilled in me values of what it meant to be a man.
Yeah.
As I was telling my brother here, how my dad taught me how to work on cars, taught me how to change oil, taught me how to do the things that men are supposed to do. Also, he took us to work.
Right.
My cousin Bruce and his dad worked with my dad there at the paving company, and they took us to work, and they showed us what it meant to get out here and work hard for your family, to provide.
Tell the listeners when you were a young guy, your dad brought you along. It was a hot summer day. You're on the hot asphalt mix. You're behind the paver.
Yes.
And you, what did you ask your father at that moment?
I asked my dad, how did you do this every day? And he said, son, he said, if I didn't do it, I couldn't, you wouldn't have food on the table. You wouldn't have the clothes on your back. You wouldn't have the shoes on your feet. And we wouldn't have the roof over our heads. So, sick or not, he did it. And he provided for us. And as I was telling my brother here, I watched my dad do this every day as a young man. And I watched him, hands-on when he took us in to work with him. And the asphalt coming off the truck, I don't know, 100, 200 degrees.
It's hot.
And then it's a hot summer day, and they're still out there. They're dealing in asphalt. But I never saw my dad sick, not one day in his life. I never seen him go to the hospital. I never seen him go to a doctor's appointment. People out there might say, that's crazy, that's impossible, but I never did. And the only time I saw my dad have to go to a hospital, I had to take him to the hospital because he got sick with pneumonia. And and the pneumonia was the demise of his life. It took his life, but he was a hard worker, and he taught me a lot, and that's why I can say that I'm the man I am today because of my dad. And as I was telling my brother Jim here, I said that's why it's so important that I give back, to other young men and try to teach and instill in them some of the values that my dad taught and instilled in me. Now, and it's just so important, and that's why I told him this platform here is such a powerful platform that it's gonna grow into something even bigger.
Yeah.
And I told him I thank God that He gave him the vision to do this. But you got a lot of young men out there today that don't have fathers.
That's right, Eddie. That's right. Yeah. So let me ask you before I'm going to ask you about what you're going to talk to a listener or a viewer that might not have a father.
Mm-hmm.
But am I fair in my understanding that your father told you at that moment that sometimes a man has to do what needs to get done?
Yes, sir.
Because
Yes,
there's
sir.
just has to get done, and it might not be about what he wanted to do, but what it needed to be done.
Needed to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if there's a listener or a viewer that doesn't have a father, that did not have the influence of a father, how would you encourage a young man or an older man or whatever age man that doesn't have a father, right? How to continue to pursue or where to find, Eddie, some godly men, some godly advice, some counsel for them to move forward?
I say first and foremost, you got to basically surround yourself with positive people, whether they're young or old. Find you a great church home that have positive role models that are in the church home that can teach and lead and guide young men. But as I told Jim, one of my stories when I was a young boy coming up, and like I said, my dad was always in my life. But, as I was a young man at Cass Middle School, 7th and 8th grade, I played on the basketball team with some young guys that didn't have fathers in their homes. And as I stated to him, my dad was there, but my dad, I never seen him wear a tie. I never seen him tie a tie. So I, myself as a young man, I didn't know how to tie a tie. But Coach Deems, Lawyer Deems, Danny Deems at the time, he told us before every basketball game, you're to come to school in a suit and tie. And he said that if you don't know how to tie a tie, he said, we're going to learn and teach you how to tie a tie. And that's where it all started. Right. And that was a very important part of my life for me, because that taught me that here's a positive role model. Here's a person that I can learn from. Here's a person that can teach me something, that my dad didn't get the opportunity to teach me. Not that he didn't want to.
Yeah, right.
That's but because he just didn't do it. He didn't wear a tie.
Yeah.
And I never seen my dad in a suit. So Coach Dean was there to teach all of us.
That's right.
All of us young men how to tie a tie. And that's what you need to do as a young man that's trying to find that role model, that person that can teach you the values of what it means to be a man. Because as I told him, I was not going to stay a middle schooler all my life. I had to grow up. If God allowed me to reach the age of adulthood, I was probably going to marry, which I did. I was probably going to have my own family, which I did. And I had to know, how do I do this? Well, let me go back to what my dad taught me. Let me go back to what Lawyer Deans taught me. I could basically fall back on those teachings. So, to those who are looking for that positive role model, they're out there. But you just got to know what to go to find.
And as you were talking, Eddie, I was thinking to myself, like, just because we as men may not have a skill that someone else doesn't means that we're not bad.
Right.
Men build men. That's why we're here as an organization saying, men build men. It's plural. It takes a lot of men to build into and invest. And there's also the opportunity to pour into other guys, even if they're currently being poured into.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean like, okay, well, your dad was building you into a man. It didn't mean that Lawyer Deems, he just said, well, he's taken care of. I'm not going to.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's always an opportunity for us to have add on to what somebody else is doing.
That's right.
Right? And we were talking before we began recording. Sometimes it's qualified, you said, if somebody's willing to learn, willing to learn. I think part of what you were saying is you were willing to be taught by your coach on how to tie a tie. There was an additional skill in your life that you would be willing to see the value in. And I think that is important, right? And I also think, like, I just wanted to take a minute real quick to affirm your teachability. You're obviously older than me, but what I'm gathering from this initial conversation very quickly is you had a willingness in your spirit to be taught. You had a willingness to be taught by your father. You had a willingness to be taught by Coach Deems. I've known you personally. You have a willingness to be taught by God as you study and prepare to be taught. So I just want to take a minute and sort of call that out and affirm that, Eddie. And you take us back to your formidable high school in Ackworth, like, you know, in the mid 70s. You know, what were you doing? Were you playing ball, fishing, hunting? What were you doing as a young boy?
Fishing. That's what me and my dad done all
Bass
the time.
fishing, lake,
just off the bank, whatever we caught, we caught. But you know, fishing with Dad was one of my things, and when he retired, he and I went and I bought him all this fishing equipment and all this stuff so we could fish more right before he got sick and passed away. But fishing, riding motorcycles,
road bikes or dirt bikes?
Dirt bikes.
I didn't know that about you, man.
Yes, dirt bikes.
Man, we were just talking about for real.
Yes, sir.
You learned something
yes,
new.
Sir. Yes, sir. Dirt bikes.
What kind of dirt bikes, man?
It was just a Kawasaki.
Okay.
It wasn't no big bike. It wasn't no big one. But
you sure they didn't need to beef up the suspension for your size,
not
bro?
then. I was 100 and probably 60 pounds.
Okay.
But that was one of my Christmas presents, and you know, Mama got me a dirt bike for Christmas,
That's awesome.
And we really enjoyed it. My sister had a moped, but I got.
Is that the moped had a little you had the pedal to get it cranking?
Pedals on. That's how that one was. But but yeah, I mean, me and my dad fished all the time. Me and my cousin, and we rode dirt bikes. You know, and I just love sports. I played basketball. That's all I wanted to do. As growing up as a little boy, I said that me and my buddy Harsh Shaw, we always said our dream is to play professional basketball.
Okay.
And we basically didn't have AAU back then. You didn't have all the social media stuff like you have now. So whatever you did, you just did. If you got recognized, you got recognized. But I always wanted to play professional basketball. But both of us ended up going to college to play college football. But you know, I went off to college to play at Western Kentucky. He went off to college to play at Auburn. But you know, I didn't play football until I was in the 8th grade.
Okay.
I didn't play Pop Warner football. I didn't do nothing. All I wanted to do was play basketball.
How did the conversion from basketball to football? Was it puberty? You just all of a sudden just boom, you just became so much larger, or somebody recruit you, or what happened?
Well, just fall in the crowd.
Gotcha.
I mean, when all of them decided to play football, I said I'm gonna play too. Okay. I had no desire, but ended up being a pretty decent football player. And I graduated from Cass High School at 175 pounds soaking wet. Went off to college and came back home after 3 years at 200 and almost 40 pounds.
What were you in high school? Were you running back? Were you quick? Were you fast?
Running back, yeah, I was pretty fast.
So were you recruited by Western Kentucky for running back?
No, defensive back.
Defensive back.
Defensive
and
back.
You put that kind of weight on?
Put that kind of weight on, yep. And they moved me to outside linebacker.
Yeah, but you could run.
So I thought I was fast, Jim, until I got there, and we got timed in the 40, and I ran the 40 time against some guys from Texas. I've never seen a kid run a 4.340.
Yeah.
Until I saw it.
Yeah.
And when I saw it, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I thought I was fast at a 4.5 40, but no.
Yeah. Eddie, we were talking yesterday I was having a private conversation, and it is somewhat applicable what you just said. That same spirit of teachability, I think, comes from humility.
Yeah.
And your comment about you being humble to acknowledge, like, okay, I just saw this guy run a 4.340. Sometimes our best might not be enough.
Yes.
And there might be other men, other people, other athletes that are just better
Yeah.
than us, you know?
Yeah, but the thing is, and even at that, don't let that stop your drive.
That's right.
Don't let that stop your determination. And that's for somebody out there that you know, you're in this same predicament. You know, don't let it stop you.
Yep.
And it didn't stop me, but yet and still, I knew that I had to work a little harder. I had to train a little harder to get to where I needed to get, and that's the way it is in life. You know, we just can't get comfortable with where we are. You know, I can't get comfortable with where I am just because, you know, I think that I got everything I need or everything I want. I can't just get comfortable there because I can lose that at any point in my life. You know, what do I have to fall back on? You know, I got to have some other life skills that I can do to keep ahead of the game, you know, but so many people get comfortable, young men get comfortable with where they are. You know, you just got to keep working.
Don't you feel like some of that, your desire to work, was modeled by your father too,
Yes, sir.
right?
Yes,
And
sir.
definitely the influence of that. Tell us a little bit about up until that point from your life to that point in Western Kentucky. Was faith a part of your family? Was a belief system? Did you have a good character? Were you making good decisions as a man? Like, where were you at on the personal side of things?
Well, I was one of those young boys that with me and my older brother and older sister and younger sister, mama made us go to church.
Okay.
We all went to church. All of us went through the motion and the rigmarole of being baptized. But, you know, we was not living the Christian life. We was just basically going through the motion. But, you know, but we always had to be in church. And I mean, I thank God for that because it never left me.
Yeah.
You know, that never left me, you know, and when we had our daughter, my wife, and I tell people about my wife all the time, and she's somebody special, y'all. Yeah. And people, I tell people, me and my wife have been together all of our lives. We went to school from Emerson Elementary from first all the way up to 12th grade, graduated together. She went off to school to do cosmetology, and I went off to school to play football, and we came back together and married. So we've been together all our lives.
Yep.
I know she's probably sick of me, but she can't get rid of me. But the thing about it is that, you know, Mama always instilled in us, get up, we going to church.
Okay.
And that's the same value that I try to instill in my daughter and to my son, Philip. You know, get up, we're going to church.
Yep.
If you stand here in my house, we're going to church. You know, if you living under our roof, we're going to church. So you know, that was a very important value that Mama taught us. Daddy, not all the time. Daddy would go to church when he wanted to. But Mama was always there. She always made us.
Okay.
We had to get up and go to church.
Okay. So let's take it back, pick it back up. You're in college, 3 years, Western Kentucky. You sort of finish up your school. What happens next in your life?
After that, like I said, I basically finished school, got out, and somehow, some way, my brother connected me and my wife back together again. And we kind of talked, and we ended up marrying in '89, and we'll be married 36, 37 years. Don't let me get it wrong. I get in trouble. But you know, we basically married at a young age. We had to basically learn at a young age what it meant to be able to get out here and work and to make it, you know, on your own. Not that we didn't have parents that would have stepped in and helped if we'd have got in trouble, but we basically purposed in our hearts and minds that we're going to do this on our own together. And, you know, and we were able to buy us a home. We were able to pay off our cars, and we were able to do everything at a very young age. And you know, and it's so important that all of this stuff that people think is important, the houses, the cars, and this and the material things. My wife and I, we didn't raise our daughter up on Nike tennis shoes. She didn't. I tell you a story about my daughter Kelby, and people think I'm telling a story until they ask my wife. We always bought her shoes at Walmart, the light up shoes. And I was at home one evening when she came home off the school bus. She got off the school bus crying and mad and just upset. And I said, "What's wrong with you, Kelby?" She said, "Daddy, that girl stepped on my shoes and got my shoes dirty." And the shoes was like $16. I said,
Right.
"Kelby, I can clean them up. I can get you some more." So we didn't raise her up with material, with a material mentality where she thinks she had to wear designer this and designer that. And we're doing the same thing with our little girl Avery now. We don't instill in her that you got to wear, Gucci this.
Yeah, brand name stuff.
That you don't know. We didn't raise our first daughter that way. Tracy and I didn't come up that way. And that's important to me and my family. Now, some other families may not be. They believe in buying their kids designer this, designer that. They may stand in long lines for the new Jordans when they come out. I'm not doing it. So, and the same things that my father and my mother put in me, we're putting in our kids. And, and that's very important because we're not going to be here forever. When you and I leave from here, I heard a story about you saying, you taught your daughters how to change tires and, you taught your daughters how to do things. That's what we got to do. I don't have a son other than Philip and my daughter Kelby, but I try to teach them things, and we tell them all the time, we ain't going to be here forever. Now, I know you got young that are leaving here before the old, but yet and still, while I got an opportunity, I got to do my best to help you, when I'm not around, to make it when I'm not around, to thrive when I'm not around, to be successful when me and your mama is not around, because we're not going to be here forever.
Yeah. Eddie, when you guys first got married and you were making money, what was your source of income? What was your profession? What were you, quote, doing throughout the day to bring income?
My first job that I had was down in Marietta, down by the Coca-Cola plant.
Okay.
But the job and the profession that I'm in now, I started in 1990 in water treatment.
Yeah, here in Cartersville,
Here
water
in
treatment.
Cartersville, yes, sir. That's where my career started out at, here in Cartersville.
Yeah. What about if the listener or the viewer is unfamiliar with hey, there is a profession about treating water? Just give us a brief overview of like what is treatment of water. Like maybe there's people who have no idea where the water in the faucet comes from and how it's delivered.
Well, just know and understand, you can go without food, but you can't go without water.
Yep.
So that's why I said once I got into this profession, I said I got a profession I could be in for a lifetime. But, people always, they think that water, they don't drink water out of a faucet. Everybody drink bottled water because they think, well, the water that you're drinking is basically just retreated from sewer water. And it is, but it's water that's been cleaned and then put back into the rivers and the streams and basically brought back to the front of the water plants to be retreated. It's chlorinated. We go through all the regulations that the state make us go through to treat it, to make it safe. We test it for bacteria. We test it for any living organisms. We do everything. So in hindsight, the water that we basically treat and the water you drink out of your faucet is safer than the water that you basically drink from a bottled water because the bottled water is under federal regulation and they don't have to go through all the testing and the stuff that we have to do. But I started my career in water treatment in Cartersville in 1990, and I left Cartersville and went to Carrollton to run their system where my daughter went to college at West Georgia, so that worked out perfect. And I stayed there until she graduated in 2015, and God blessed me with another opportunity. And I don't know if I ever told you this story, but we adopted our little girl, Avery, and I wanted to be closer to home. I didn't want to be working in Carrollton anymore. And one morning I was driving to work, and I told this story. I said I cried all the way to work, from Cartersville all the way to Carrollton. I just couldn't stop crying. I couldn't stop crying. And I just know that I heard the voice of God saying, it's time. And the Lord said, it's time to move. And when I got there that morning, I went in there in my office, I typed up my 2-week notice, and I worked 2 more weeks and I left. Didn't have a job to go to. Didn't have another job set up, didn't have nothing in line. That was in April of 2014. And I left that job, and I stayed unemployed until July of 2014. But the thing about this whole story is that I left that job in April, but the job that I'm in now opened up in March. Because I was obedient to what God said, God blessed me with a job that I didn't even know was out there waiting on me in March. But yet, he provided from April, May, June, all the way to July. My daughter, I tell them, my daughter never had to come home from college. We never missed a house payment. We never missed a car payment. The power never got cut off. Everything we needed, God provided. So because I adhered to the voice of God and heard the voice of God and obeyed the voice of God, that's what's the important thing. The Bible declares that obedience is better than sacrifice. If you obedient to what God say, God will give you the blessings that you're asking him for. So, but yeah, I started out.
Yeah, why don't you just, let me pause the question, and why don't you just take a little bit of a minute, right? What if there's a listener or a viewer that is in the same spot that you were, about feeling like you're led, you have some degree of emotion going on in your life, but you also become convicted that you need to exercise a decision. Won't you speak to them a little bit about how you actually converted your emotion and your feeling and your conviction, and why you chose to take action?
Yes. Well, I can tell you now, hey, that was a very tough decision, because as I said, I didn't have another job waiting on me. I didn't have another job that I knew at that time was out there for me. But I knew, because of the way that I walked with God, the way that I talked to God, and the way God talked to me in my prayer life and my commitment to God. Don't get it wrong. Now, I tell people a lot. I ask God, why are you wanting me to do this?
That's right.
Why are you wanting me to leave this job? I don't have another job to go to. How am I going to provide for this and provide for that? But God said, cast your cares on me, for I care it for you. And when he said he carried, that TH, it's continuous. And he carried for us enough to the point where I could sit at home. I could basically just let my mind rest. I could basically let my body rest. Because I would make that drive back and forth. Some days I'd be at work so long that I'd be so tired, I'd tell my wife I'm going to have to stay overnight because I couldn't drive home.
Yeah. But
God took all that away to bless me to be closer to home. He heard what I asked. Hey, Lord, I want to be closer to home. We got Avery. She's a young baby. She was 4 at the time. I want to be able to get to her if I need to get to her, and instead of an hour and plus, and 15, 20 minutes. But God heard my cry, and when we are connected to God, and we know God is connected to us, He gonna provide for us. But the thing we got to know and understand is that, are you willing to trust Him in a season like that? In that season that I was going through, I was willing to trust Him enough to go in there and type that letter up and say, I'm gone.
Yeah. Did it get harder for you, Eddie? Like, maybe there's some listeners or viewer that, hey, like, okay, taking a step is the first step. But man, day 2, day 3, day 31, day 62, did it become more difficult and more tension laden? You know, people, hey, Eddie, what are you thinking, man? Eddie, you dropped your job. Did you any mockers, any scorners, did anybody, none of that stuff?
None of that. But I can tell you what God did is, as I told you, I left in April of 2014. But the job that I'm in now opened up in March. And God knew just what I needed when I needed it. And the thing about it, Jim, and to somebody out here that needs to hear this, you know, when you locked into God and you know God is locked into you, you don't have to do nothing but just sit in the waiting room and just wait for God to answer your prayer. I didn't have to call about the job that I'm in now. Somebody called me. And when I went in for the interview, I was the only person that they interviewed. When I interviewed and got home an hour later, he called me and said, okay, we want to give you the job. And not only did he say he wanted to give me the job, but he said, I want to give you the job at the pay that you asked for. I said, it couldn't have been nobody but God, because I didn't have another job lined up. I didn't have nothing to go to. I didn't have nothing, you know, but yet God had already opened up that door. But he wanted to see if I had enough trust and faith to take that step.
Obedience.
And that's it. Obedience is better than sacrifice. So, you know, that's a word to somebody out there today. You know, all God is telling you to do is trust him. Are you willing to take that next step? Because it may seem like it's difficult. It may seem like it's hard. It may seem like it just can't happen. But God is telling you, take that next step, you know, and watch and see, don't I open up the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing. He didn't say blessings. He said a blessing that you and I won't even have room enough to receive it. And right now, I don't have room enough to receive the blessing that God have instilled on my life, on my family's life. He's allowed me to meet good men like yourself, Dr. Riddle. I mean, even though he done cut on me enough, I told him I'm gonna be the bionic man after he get done with it.
Sorry.
But you know, that's just the way God is. I mean, you know, he just opened up doors and avenues, and you know, and and I'm so thankful for you, you know, and your friendship and how you've been there, and you know, and we've been able to lock in and just be a part of, you know, each other's lives, man. It's just a blessing.
Yeah, for sure. And when you applied for a new position, was it this exactly the same as what you had done, or were there some new responsibilities and newer industry that you sort of step your way into?
It was the same responsibility. Okay. It was me basically becoming superintendent over that facility, but it was a smaller setup though.
Yeah. Which is why God's provision, the same pay, was only what God could do.
Dude, that's it.
That's right.
That's it. And that's what's so amazing about God. And that's why I trust him with everything. And I trust him with my life and my family's life, and you know, and everything that I have because of him.
Yeah.
You know, I don't tell nobody I done nothing on my own. Now, have I made all the best decisions as a man? No. Have I always made the right decision all the time as a man? No. But, you know, thanks be to God that we got a God that will forgive us, you know, of our sins, and, you know, and turn us around and make us a new creature in Christ, and, you know, and help us in a way that man can't. Man will tend to want to, they want to talk about you. Man don't want to build you up. Man want to bring up what you did and
That's right.
when you did it. And, you know, man don't want to forget the things that we done. Well, you ain't perfect yourself.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
You're not perfect yourself. I mean, we all sin to come short of the glory of God.
Amen.
But it's good to know that you got men like yourself, and, you know, and men like myself that's willing to just help, you know, a dying world, you know, and to be a part of something positive. And you just don't know how many young men need this kind of instruction in their life.
Yeah, that's where, like, I mean, obviously, organizationally, men build men. Alluded to it earlier in the conversation. You're talking about it now. There is the importance of men building men. That's actually why I am, as the facilitator, definitely trying to put men that I respect in front of the audience, in front of the listener, to say, hey, it is imperative to do this. And as you were talking, Eddie, I kept thinking about, like, all right, man, like, sometimes there has to be a willingness, as I alluded to earlier, to be taught, right? And there also has to be a willingness to be in relationship with one another. And then as you were sharing their story, there comes a time, though, that you have to act out your beliefs. And that's why I was asking you, man, like, after you acted out your belief and after you were in this process, you might not have vacillated or up and down or back and forth. But what if there's somebody who's made a similar decision as an act of faith that doesn't maybe have a big, strong group of men to be in relationship with and might be having a really difficult time moving forward? What would you say to them, man? How would you encourage and build them up and edify them?
Stay the course. Stay the course. You know, when you think about it in the aspect of God, there's no retreat in God. And there can't be no retreat in you either. I mean, and that's the mindset that the enemy want to placate on us. He want to make us think that you need to give up. You know, you need to throw in the towel. You know, this man don't care about you. These folks don't care about you. Nobody is pulling for you. Nobody is wanting to see you make it. That's what the enemy want to put in our mindset. But God say different. You know, God say different. God tell us we can make it. You know, it may get tough sometimes.